everyone. I am Alexandra Proka, and I am the host of the Be Inspired, Be Empowered video series here at Women in Localization. It's a series where we highlight and we talk with women from outside of the localization industry with stories that we find inspirational, and we hope they're inspirational for our members as well. Today, I am so excited to talk with someone who has been in the industry for about 10 years. And she had a lot to say. She has a lot to say about localization in both small companies and bigger companies. Anca Greve is the Senior Director of Global Expansion of Slack / Salesforce. She started at Slack, then which became Salesforce later. She has 10 years of experience in localization. And the reason I wanted to have her today is because her career path illustrates a true Silicon Valley story that involves courage, determination, passion, curiosity, and that willingness to turn unturned corners. Anca started at Slack as an executive assistant and worked her way up to the role of director of localization today. All that while having 2 young children. Welcome, Anca.
Thank you.
I'm so happy to be in a conversation with you. When we did the pre-prep interview, your passion and curiosity came right through, and I wanted to dig right into that. But before that, I want to make a personal disclosure that both you and I come from Romania,
We
and
do.
although we discovered each other on LinkedIn, but there's not a lot of us. And
Nope.
although the localization industry is growing in Romania, but we're so happy to have found each other.
Yeah.
And I want to dig into your career and how your road has been. So, as I was saying in my introduction, you have had administrative roles, event manager and executive assistant. When you came to Slack in 2015, you were hired as an executive assistant. And
Mm.
today you're leading localization at Slack / Salesforce. So I'm curious to know, what do you think made that transition possible? What was your road?
Yes, this is such a great question. Thank you again for having me. I'm so excited to talk to you. I love that we discovered each other because like you said, Romanians are not, we're far and few. So if there are Romanians out there, like I would love to get to know you, particularly in this industry. But to answer your question, I think what made the transition possible? It was a long road. Like there were other, similar roles I kind of progressively climbed, over these last 10 years. But from very early on, I see a problem, I have to have a solution. And I'm willing to sort of tackle whatever problem needs to be fixed at any given time. Early Slack days, this mindset was critical because we had few resources, company was growing quickly. And so that was a key piece. I think just being able to look at what needs to be done and figure out how to get it done. I also was really fortunate to have a team of leaders who listened to me and who believed in my vision and who, supported me when I failed and kind of were my advocates. So that's the second thing that I think was really important. And honestly, the third thing I would say is like a ton of work. A ton of things went right and some things didn't go so right. So I think the work to scale localization at a growing company, to pivot and to continue to socialize that vision as the company grew. At one point we had so many people that we were like, we don't know all these people. They don't know what localization is. We have to educate them. I think all of that is a lot of hard work. And I remember being at the office, really late, many, many nights where I was working late, but I was also so thrilled to be part of this crew that was building a product that I love. And I applied to Slack because I love the product.
I think you mentioned during our pre-prep interview about how you happen upon localization, and I would like you to develop a little bit of that because I think that's an interesting story. Here you
Yeah,
are, you're an exec
I
assistant
know.
for
It's
two
like,
leaders, and then what?
then what? So, as I was telling you, I sort of stumbled upon this because again, we had seen this organic growth in Japan of all places. And we had to figure out how to localize initially the help center, the help articles, technical documentation. And and I remember this conversation about like, how do we do that? Do we need a piece of software? Do we need to hire linguists, and how does that work? And I remember meeting with Ali Rail, who I mentioned before, who was the head of CX. And I don't remember if I gave her a one pager or I just talked to her, but there is a one pager now when I looked in my G drive from way back then. And it basically just was like, here's what I think we should do. Here's what I think, some best practices, some things we should avoid, because I'd worked as a translator for a long time. It was how I supported myself in college. And I also I have dual citizenship, so I worked for the EU delegation to the United Nations, so I was always kind of like around languages. I didn't realize this field was so amazing, or I would have stumbled upon it sooner. But yeah, I think, it was just I never had, I never had a job description. I just was like, here's what I know. And then they kind of were like, do you want to try this? Start with the help center, see where you can go. And I actually started by translating the Slack Help Center into French. And I am not a native French speaker. So I was just like, this is terrible. They're gonna fire me. But they didn't. I figured it out. I had some really good editors who would correct all my mistakes, and it worked out, and we were able to launch. And then soon after that, I kind of had some time to develop what a program would look like. And over those months where I was also the translator, I developed a business case for hiring and for program management and all of the things that you need to run this in internally. I felt like I started pretty small now, looking back in the grand scheme of things. I was doing just help documentation, just for French. And I had some quality metrics that I would socialize so that I would help people understand, if we were to launch this thing, this is the level of quality we can expect. But yeah, you're right. I mean, I don't think, well, even now, I've never been handed, with the exception of my job description for being an EA. I was never told, like, this is your job, here is a playbook. I just developed that on my own. And again, with the I think there's something really unique about a company at that kind of hyper growth stage, where you're rolling up your sleeves alongside everybody else. And it's this lovely coordination that happens, and everyone kind of moves in the same direction. So you feel safe, like you call it, playing. You feel safe failing, because everybody's failing around you, because we're all just trying to figure this thing out. There's no thing like Slack before Slack. So yeah, I mean, the environment is there to play, and you have to sort of obviously prove success. You can't just try things and fail and then just you have to show, you're learning from your experiments. But yes, there's ample opportunity to sort of do that, iterate, and get better over time.
Great. As I said, your story involves examples of curiosity and fixing things, as you said, finding solution to problems. And I think that's very inspirational. I want to move on to a little bit more personal questions, which is how do you personally define success?
How do I define success? I think through impact. So if you can have, we're with localization, we've built tools and processes that have served multiple teams. So and obviously our end users, our global customers. So I think being successful means having impact at scale. I think being successful means that, me as a leader, I'm also focused on my team and my partners, and I'm really focused on feedback. Um, I think success can also be operational excellence, where you take this big picture vision or your ideal scenario, and then you actually make it happen. And then also the leadership kind of team development piece is for me, having a team who I am able to throw ideas around with, where people on my team also feel safe, engaging in feedback loops where they feel safe playing. That's also success for me.
Okay, I want to dig a little deeper and finding out what for you as a person. And one thing that you said just now was that sounds like success also means to be a good leader and an inclusive and a leader who hears her members. What else in general, like in your personal and work life?
Ah,
Do you consider yourself successful now and where you are with your life at this point in life and time?
yes, I've had a lot of successes. I'm not finished. There's a lot more that I can do, but I think the fact, that I was able to implement my vision and make localization a centralized service within Slack is going from being a translator on the help center to doing this. Like, yes, I have to, even though I'm an overachiever, so I'll always be like, this is not enough. I need to do more. But yes, absolutely. I think I am successful. I think the things that make me feel sometimes like I'm not as successful as I can be is just there's just not enough time. Like you said, when you have kids, it's like you're constantly trying to balance your personal life with your work life and make the stakeholders happy and the partners and care about the team, but then also care about your family and be present. And that's um we might get into that, but that's also challenging, and that sometimes does make me feel like maybe I'm not quite haven't quite found the right balance yet.
Exactly. That was my next question. So, how did you manage actually to reconcile a fast-moving upward career with deciding to start a family? Because both your kids are under 10, right? Yeah.
Yes. um I don't know if I did think about how I would answer this, but I think in day-to-day life, life just happens and you're just along for the ride. So I don't actively think like, I'm going to do this and it will. I think the best thing I've done though is I've made it very clear to my team and my leadership that, here are the times when I'm available. Here are the times when I typically disconnect. And those times are usually school drop-offs, school pickups. And sometimes I have to adjust my schedule to sort of orient myself around my kids' schedule. And I've been very clear with again, both my team and my leadership structure about that, and they've all been very supportive.
So, on that note, what would you advise new mothers to do if they also want to have a career? We're always in this predicament still in the 21st century.
Yes. Well, definitely, I would say be transparent about your working hours and your boundaries. And don't apologize for your schedule. Like you said, a lot of people are in this, and then it's not just, it's everybody. It's not just women, but it's just all parents and all people with other, people might have other commitments. So I think communication really helps. I'm a night owl, which is terrible when you have kids because you can stay up till 1 a.m., right? But I know that my productive time is at night, so then I orient some of the more creative, like thinking things that I have to do for the nighttime because I know that's when I'm typically more relaxed and can kind of have my stream of consciousness moments. Um, what else? I think I would say, and maybe, just like show some vulnerability, to like tell people that sometimes, and I think humility helps. And I subscribe to all of the Brene Brownisms where, you have negative capacity sometimes, and you just have to be open about that. And that's totally understandable. We're all going through so much all the time in this world, in our workplace, and I think showing some vulnerability helps build trust.
What kind of mentorship or advice you feel help you move up?
Best mentors for me. were people who kept asking questions, as annoying as that was. Because sometimes you go to mentors and you're like, you did this, how did you do it? And they're like, but why do you want to do that? And what have you thought through? And it's like those types of tough questions, kind of people throwing things back at you, um, where you're challenged to think through things. And when you're challenged to, maybe they give you a nugget of their experience, but then you have to build. I think those are the best types of mentors, the people who not necessarily are your echo, but are like a conducive strategic echo where the onus is still on you to figure things out and to think. But they're sort of just there to give that some scaffolding or, some structure. Every meeting that I've been in with an executive and they've asked those tough questions, I just like reach out to people afterwards and I'm like, hi, you know me, we just talked. I like this and this and this. I like your style of leadership. And I'm just upfront with them and I just ask them if they're willing to sit down with me at a regular cadence and just like talk through, you know, the various parts of the business that we're interested in. So sometimes it'll be people management centric, sometimes it'll be localization centric or business process, business operations. Um, there's more and more like how do executives think about AI and AI integration and LLM assisted workflows and LLM assisted, um, strategies for various things. I think those are all. So I think I'm specific about the topic and sort of guide people with what I would like to get from them. And I haven't had anyone tell me no so far. So I've never gone through a program. I just sort of feel like I vibe with certain people and I want to get more of their thinking and their time.
What is your personal vision of the localization industry of the future? Because we know the present is, and you just named it. With the experience that you've had and your creative and solutions oriented mind and always probing, where do you see localization in the future?
Yeah, oh, I I we all think about this a lot, I'm sure. And, I also hear so many people talk about this. And I think something that my team and I have talked about is this shift from um because again, like when I started at Slack, there was this focus on craft and making things almost perfect, near native, making people feel like the product was built with them in mind, making them feel like it originated, in their country, in their city. I think that we're seeing this shift from that kind of like as close to perfect quality mindset to let's just make it good enough and figure out what good enough is because there's this pressure, within our industry, but also from our leaders. And it challenges the foundation of what quality is, what we've spent decades defining what quality is, and now it's kind of being turned upside down. But um, I think we're seeing a really big shift in user behavior as well. In the past, a mistranslation was a sign of an SHIT moment, like the company messed up. But today, I feel like there are so many mistranslations out there. There are so many automated subtitles. I'll watch Netflix and I'll be like, the localization team who did that. I wonder who did that. And like, will they see that this thing? And it's like that happens all the time. And I think the new generations are so used to that, that they prefer just access over linguistic beauty, which is tough, for us all, like a former translator. Um, but I think, for our users would rather have a slightly clunky um, translation of a technical manual now than wait a couple of months for whatever perfect version we might think that they would want that may never come. I think that's what people will continue to shift towards, where we will have to deliver a service that just works,
Mhm.
fast, at minimal cost, or as little cost as possible, and something that works for all of our stakeholders, and something that works for our users. So I think, just to add one last thing to that, and I'd love to debate this with people, in women in localization meetings, but most businesses are not language companies. They're software companies, they're hardware companies, they're service companies. So to them, and I see this with my stakeholders, and with my leaders, localization sometimes is a friction point. And they will look everywhere else except at you to help get rid of that friction point, which is why an AI has finally to them provided a way to remove that friction point that makes, our um, not way of life, but just like what we've done so far, our focus on quality, our focus on native or near native quality, look like an expensive hobby. And that's kind of like the hard truth, that we as an industry have to accept and kind of come together and figure out, okay, if we're not going to focus on, polishing sentence, then what is the next thing we should focus on? And I think it's managing this incredibly complex, incredibly voluminous flow of information at scale. And I'll
Yeah, I
stop.
agree with you. And that I like the invitation to the Women in Localization forums to debate this. Of course, there's tons of conversations going on, but I love your input, and it shows again flexibility. And it's as hard as it is, that's how the industry is gonna shift and survive. And we as individual contributors are adapting towards that flexibility.
Yeah.
Because we're here at Women in Localization, and our mission is to help the advance of women in our industry. I wanted to ask you questions specifically related to women, and it's if you know of one stereotype that you don't like about women and that you try to tear down through your work.
Well, I mean, for me, the I think, even, before I had kids, I was always like, how am I going to choose between my career and wanting a family? Which, I even, like, I think I even got to a point where I was like, maybe I don't want a family. Like, this job is really good? So I think that for me, it's like women, and even though I think a lot of companies, including the company I work for, are very flexible with, like I said, our working, like, as a woman, as a mother, I feel like, I have to choose. Sometimes I'd absolutely have to choose. I have to choose to not, finish looking at the project tracker because my baby's crying, right? And, like, I think that's for me the stereotype that I'm trying to, I don't know, maybe not break, but I'm struggling with choosing between my ambition and my career and motherhood and being a good mom, and, like, figuring out what that means and not having enough time to figure out what that means? So, like, I think that's one thing. And then one of the things that I hope people take away from my story is, like, don't let your role define you. You know,
Mm.
I studied global affairs. I thought I wanted to be a diplomat. We can talk about this another time, why that it didn't end up happening, but which is, why I had to figure out how to make a living, and found administrative roles, which honestly, like, that was really fun, having those roles, getting to talk to execs, like, figuring out how people think at those levels. Um, but don't let that define you. If you want to get somewhere, there are ways to get there. Um, if, like, for me, I never thought I would start out as an EA and end up in technical leadership. But it happened, and it happened organically. Like, I never mapped it out. It just, like I said, you see problems, you solve them, the right people notice, and magic happens.
That's an awesome perspective, but I still think that that magic contains exactly what we talked about, how I described you in the intro. But it definitely it's a blend of personal characteristics plus being at the right time at the right place at the right time and all that.
Absolutely.
Let's go into rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Tell us a quote that resonates with you and why.
Um, a quote that resonates with me.
Shall I
I'm
give you a
not,
tip? Brené Brown. You must have a
I,
lot of
oh,
Brené Brown quotes in your pocket.
like the whole book. Um,
Which book?
it doesn't, so the quote that I think I'm going to okay, so I'm gonna paraphrase this, but Stuart Butterfield, Slack CEO, original Slack CEO used to say this all the time, and I think Steve Jobs said it before him, but basically like hire people who are smarter than you. If you are the smartest person in the room as the boss, as the leader, as the manager, something's not right. Like it is, all we do is a team effort. And if people around you are, and I'm not saying smarter than you as an intelligence, but maybe more experienced, maybe more of a subject matter expert, if you do that and you engage in feedback with folks, you just learn so much and you just become a better leader. And I truly believe, part of that magic sauce is my team. They're a huge part of my success and being surrounded by people smarter than me that I learn from every day. So I don't know if anyone will watch this, but Slack localization, the TMS team, you guys are the best. They're the best. So I'll stop there.
Sweet. What book is on your nightstand? Although we discuss it as a mother with a career, you might not have a book on your nightstand, but maybe aspirational book on your nightstand, on the aspirational nightstand.
Yes, aspirational book on the aspirational nightstand. I got recently, so I got back to reading Michael Lopp. Michael Lopp was one of our engineering leaders at Slack in the early days. He's had an illustrious career in the software industry, but he has a book called Managing Humans, and he does a ton of blog posts and rants in repose. And I can send this to you if you need it, but his approach to management just really resonates with me. So I sometimes read his, not necessarily his book, but his posts. Um, in my work, particularly now that I'm, working to centralize this tool and trying to align teams, someone recommended Agile Samurai to me. It's a book that was written like 20 years ago, maybe more, but it's so good and it's so true. It's just like it's basically a guide to agile software development, and just how to deliver valuable software quickly and efficiently. And I've implemented some things and they've worked really great. So huge advocate for that. So I don't, read these like cover to cover. I'll just like read a snippet. And so I like these too. Um,
Great resources. Are you listening to podcasts? And if you do you have any recommendations?
I am listening to
Oh, you are.
podcasts.
Great.
When I walk to work or home, I'll listen to So I'm still part of me is, from my political and UN career, I still have a good story about international affairs. So I'm listening to The Rest is Classified, which is all about, it's like a mix between like true spy stories that have been declassified and just like um a little bit of like how global affairs and international relations play out. They do a really good job. I think the podcasters, one of them is like a former CIA analyst, and the other one is a journalist. So it's like a really fun, and they have great banter. I think banter on podcasts is like a requirement. You have to have good banter. So the rest is classified. Check it out.
Okay, great. And last rapid fire question is, okay, of course, the classic question. What personality would you have dinner with and why? Dead or alive?
Um, so I had a long flight and I started watching a documentary about Katharine Hepburn, and I really want to have dinner with her. She seemed like such a cool woman. She like broke all like talking about stereotypes. She was truly a pioneer. And she has just such an interesting life. So I would choose her.
Yeah. Okay. Great recommendation. Well, thank you, Anka, for such an interesting talk. And it was a
Thank
pleasure
you.
to have you here at Women in Localization Be Inspired video interview.
Thank you, Alexandra.